This is what I resent about them putting that stupid thing over there. They put a mirror there for everybody to get their selfies. Everybody has to stop and take pictures and point their cameras towards this direction as the mirror is above their head. They call this stupid thing so. Now, why do they call it so? It actually resembles like a deer. But there's a saying about a deer with its antlers caught in the headlights, but this is put at the lights, the street lights. My daughter's head was literally butchered on the top of her head. She doesn't like the name butchered, but I call it butchered because it shouldn't have happened. She had a cut with sewing stitches on her head. They didn't look like medical professional stitches. What was going on? But this happened to her out in LaFontaine. The police ignored this. But then they go and they put this stupid obstruction there, this rusty old piece of crap, on the corner across from my window. But they call it sew, S-O-W, instead of S-E-W, like sewing stitches. But it looks like where the area my daughter's head was cut, it's around the frontal lobe area, right around where antlers go on a deer. But oddly, David Merkley was talking about a deer. And it was something about the comment. He pointed at the hospital and he said something about a deer. There wasn't any deer standing there, but he said something about a deer. I don't know what the significance was of this comment. But in 2013, as my daughter was grabbed in a text threat from 705-999-6775. My daughter Haley was staying in LaFontaine with some friends. She was staying with a Heather Lalibert and some other various different people. She was with Scott Maurice, Bob Wilson. She said that she was being abused by Scott Maurice and Bob Wilson, who were sideswiping her in their vehicles and doing all kinds of bullying. But she said that she was raped by Bob Wilson. As she was held down, raped, she was being watched by Scott Maurice. But then she has this cut on her head after these text threats started. The text threats about any blonde can have a red head, blah, 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 blah. Now, a redhead could be like my auburn-haired daughter, or a redhead could be like a bludgeoned head, like red blood cut. But these police seemed to ignore my reports when I went to them, and they actually helped this lady who lived in LaFontaine, Teresa Marshall-Doan. Even though this person was planning to kidnap my child, in the text threats it was very clear that this person was stalking and waiting for any moment, any opportunity. And it even said this in the text threats. But in the text threats, they wanted to use mental health threats as a way to steal my house. That said there's something about, we are going to put you in the mental hospital and we know somebody who will do that. And then the house will be ours. We are just waiting on any one wrong thing. This is what it said in these threats. But in the meantime, my daughter's head was stitched up on the top of it for something that happened. I didn't get to tell her about these text threats that I got because she was staying at some place out in LaFontaine and I don't drive a car. So she showed up one day with this Teresa Marshall-Doan lady grabbing my younger child as planned, but the police ignored my reports. I went to the police. I told them of the threats on my cell phone. I asked the police officer to keep my cell phone, telling him that I would like him to investigate, but he said, no, we won't be needing the phone. I also spoke to the Midland High School principal and told her that my daughter was being threatened and I was worried about a kidnap. So I told her that my daughter can't be on Facebook. I want her to be watched. She has to be protected. This was before Officer Lawton and Officer Patton assisted this crime. But then they said David Merkley is the reason. Why would David Merkley be the reason? But he wasn't there. The ones who were conducting the crime were these police officers and Teresa Marshall-Doan. Why blame the person who wasn't there? Those police officers aren't meant to follow David Merkley's orders. no matter who David Merkley is, even if he's a philanthropist or the Queen of England or whatever, they're supposed to follow what the chief of police tell them, or follow any reports and complaints that they get from somebody who has a problem of a crime going on. Well, why have they been ignoring all these crimes that I reported and treating me as if I'm a nobody? When Bill Edwards got in the fire department all of a sudden, I don't know why, but he had a blind left eye, legally blind. He has no peripheral vision because he was shooting guns as he was a teenager. And he was charged for guns, but they ignore this. Now, a person who's violently abusive, but he also shoots at people with guns, they don't seem to think there's anything alarming about that. But anyway, they hired him in this fire department after Bill Edwards had charges for assaulting me in my sleep in 1998 as I was pregnant with my daughter Heidi. Because I was on my third child, I felt kind of stuck. I was an at-home mom. And then my daughter, she had a birth injury. She was almost 11 pounds, and she had like a broken clavicle, and then she had a heart murmur from that. And I had to wait 3 years for her to have a heart device put in by a catheter. But through those 3.5 years, it was like a touch and go kind of scare because she was getting bouts of pneumonia. And even though she thrived well and grew very well and everything, she was still getting these bouts of pneumonia. So, I mean, when you wake up with a child like that, it's like, sometimes you don't even sleep for 12 nights, right? Like, you just worry. But anyway, I was an at-home mother. So it's not like I was out building job opportunities or status or anything like that, because I was kind of glued to my children. But Bill had a criminal record from 1998. And in the same year, Curtis Mason was arrested because he had a driving offense where he almost hit this girl named Jessica Legowski, who lived up the street on Glenbogie. I was subpoenaed to testify in this incident on behalf of Luke Poirier for the Minden Police Station. I was supposed to be protected, but then, lo and behold, Cheryl Mason Morin gets with my ex-spouse when she's cheating on her husband in 2006. Cheryl is actually who frauded my house. She used Patricia File. But anyway, regardless of that, when Bill Edwards was suddenly let on the Midland Fire Department in about 2003, 2004, he began saying he could abuse me all he wants because now he is a hero. He said that he will go out as a hero as I will go out as a nobody. Go out. Now, what does that mean? He will go out as a hero as I go out as a nobody. So later he shacked up with Cheryl Mason with this revenge against me, right? Because I was there for the subpoena to testify in court against Curtis Mason. It was a driving offense, so he lost his license. So they had made this whole driving scenario against me abusively because I don't drive a car. I mean, it's not that I'm not able or capable of driving a car. I just choose not to for the expense and everything. You know, I was an at-home mother for much of the time, and I was reliant on his income much. And it's not like he was very lenient with me to allow me money or anything. When I wanted to go to school, I actually applied for a nursing course when I got pregnant with my daughter Heidi. But I decided not to go with that because, even though I passed the tests and everything, because I was pregnant. So later on, I decided to do the PSW course after my daughter was well. And he told me I have to pay for school myself, that he's not forking out a dime for me. So I paid for the schooling myself. I bought a van, the Venture van, and I had to put it in his name. I paid $76,000, or actually $7,600 for this van for the down payment. And I couldn't put it in my name because I didn't have a license yet, and I had to learn to drive, right? I had to get a license. Well, he told me that he's not helping me to learn to drive. that I have to do that myself. I have to fork out the money to go to driver's ed if I want to drive. Well, I just put all this money into the van, and I put all this money into my personal support worker school course. So I didn't have any money left. I didn't have enough. But he told me he's not going to fork out a dime to help me with anything, because that's what abusive men do. So then he suddenly got in the fire department in the same duration that I was going to school, trying to thrive through this PSW course, which I did well. I got a 97.5% average throughout the whole course, in spite of running soccer for kids, baseball for kids on the side, which is actually a business, but it wasn't deemed as a business because I just did that out of my home. And, I had kids on the side. So raising 3 kids, plus looking after the soccer and the baseball, I went to school. I got a 97.5% average, but I had to pay for that all myself. This man had no willingness to help me. When I went to the graduation, he told me that he's not going to look after the kids or whatever, right? I had to make a deal with him in order to go through to the graduation party. He went to this graduation party and humiliated me in front of all my schoolmates. He squealed the tires. He pulled donuts in circles out in front of we had the meeting at a bar, actually. It was at the bar on like Shanana's bar. But he humiliated me, like, severely. And he abused me that night, too. So this is the kind of thing I had to go to. Every time I thrived with anything and I did well at something, I was getting beat down again. I would put out the money for something, and then I would get sideballed. Well, he was getting in the fire department here the time I had my courses. I was stuck having to take my child to my classes with me because he refused to babysit. Oh, I'm not looking after the kids. That's your job, kind of thing. He wanted nothing to do with it, even though these were his children, right? Well, in 2006, as we were separated, actually 2007, as we were separated, Cheryl Mason Warren sat beside him in court in Barrie as he told this lady judge that he is not the father of my children. The judge lectured him and said, "You are the father of these children over here. My daughters were there listening to this abuse." And I ended up collapsing on the floor. I fainted. And then Cheryl and Bill sat there, pointing their fingers, laughing until the judge yelled at them to stop laughing. So this went on in 2007. They were that sadistic, but he wasn't the father of my children. Meantime, after that, he was frauding my child tax credits, stealing the money of over $80,000, a financial abuse to keep me deprived. But he was in the fire department at that time. He's only like a volunteer firefighter, but he gets paid for that. But he has the uniform and the prestige that goes along with that. He works for the town of Midland as he's a fire department member. So that kind of lowers my status and degrades me because I was just a mother. Just an at-home mother. He was going to these fire department meetings that were scheduled the exact same time as my school courses. So he was derailing me from my schooling, but the Midland Fire Department was involved in that derailment. Why? Why were their meetings always the exact same night as my courses so that I had to take my children to school? Anyway, there's much more in abuse that went on, but the fact is these police officers in Midland were ignoring the abuse, which was severe. I was assaulted in the IGA parking lot in 2007, and then Bill Edwards and Cheryl go and play this game with the Barrie judge. They play it like they compartmentalize. They'll lie in Midland, or they'll tell the truth wherever it happens to be, but then they'll tell lies. And then they'll go to Barrie, and then they'll tell a lie. But they keep everybody compartmentalized. They don't want certain people to unite together because they don't want certain people to find out the truth. If my mother knows a story, they don't want me to talk to my mother because they don't want me to find out the story. But they don't want me to talk to David Merkley because maybe David Merkley has something that he knows about that can be helpful to me in my circumstances. So they compartmentalize. They keep David Merkley over in one box, keep my mother over in one other box. Everybody they play like monopolized people, like little puppets. Said I have nobody, absolutely nobody. I don't drive a car, so it's harder for me to get to places where I need to get. They've been hacking my computer, hacking my internet accounts, hacking my cell phones. They even put a send hub on my cell phone. I can't even walk across the street to the park without them playing some instigative tactic. Cheryl does it first because Cheryl's related to the police officer, Officer Mason. Meanwhile, I testified against Curtis Mason in 1998, but here is Cheryl years later getting revenge attacks at me. I only went for a walk. I happened to go to the park, walk by the park. I didn't know Bill Edwards was sitting there on that bench, and then I saw him at the last moment, and then I made a quick steer through the fence. And then lo and behold, there was Cheryl leaping into where my grandchild was. I didn't know my grandchild was there. But she started saying, "Let's go. She's crazy." Telling my grandchild that I'm crazy, that I'm psycho and everything else. Embarrassing me as she was playing with all of these little children in the park. All of her little friends she was shaming me in front of. Cheryl calls the police instantly for nothing. I didn't even do anything. Then I called Maddie. I said, Maddie, hi. I'm your grandmother. I'm your real grandmother. I said, Maddie, I care about you. As I got to the other side of the fence, Bill Edwards jumps out off the bench. He's telling me I flash my tits off at people. He's calling me a fucking cunt. He told me, "You're off your meds again, aren't you? You're off your meds. You need to see your psychotherapist. Yes, you do. You're off your meds, aren't you? You're fucking crazy." He was saying all this abusive stuff to me after Cheryl started the ball rolling. Cheryl wouldn't let Maddie see me at the park. She actually forcefully moved her head and yanked her arm so that she doesn't look in my direction and forced her out of the park. Really disgusting what she did, but this is my grandchild that they've been keeping from me. When I got to the other side of the fence, Bill yells, "You kept my kids from me," which I didn't. Suddenly, he's the father and the grandfather after the kidnapping of 2013 when it went in their favor because of their crimes. They frauded my house in 2009. They frauded my child tax credit, stealing over $80,000. So when they were going to get caught with that, they had to kidnap the child. But the police weren't cluing in on that fact. So they wanted to steal my house. They had to come up with $80,000 to pay off the debt to the government. How are they going to get the $80,000? Well, they could steal my house and sell it. I had $125,000 worth of contents in my house that were stolen. They could have sold the contents of my house to make up for the $80,000 that they owed the government. This was a theft. They stole my house. They stole my contents of my house. They kept my child from me illegally. They went to the school principal and told the principal that I am dangerous and I'm not supposed to be around my daughter Heidi, and then if I'm on the property to call police. They said that I was at the mental hospital and I'm dangerous. I was deemed mentally insane. Cheryl told this to the brand new principal at MSS High School to humiliate me severely. Meanwhile, all they wanted anything to do with was my son Ryan, who they kept from me as much as they could since 2007. But my son's able to fight a little bit more than what his sister is. His sister has a heart device, right? She can't fight as much because her heart device can come dislodged. A doctor can understand that, but the police officers don't seem to understand that. So they were keeping my son away from me illegally. As I had a court order that I was have to have my son with me at a specific curfew, 9:00 p.m. Bill was at work. Cheryl was at the house where she was keeping my son from me illegally. She's not the mother. She wasn't my son's surety at the time because he got in a little bit of a problem. So I had to go collect my son by this curfew. I didn't want my son in jail. Cheryl was manipulating him after making him think that I'm the one that wants him in jail kind of thing, right? Oh, it's your mother. Your mother wants you in jail because she wants you to follow all these rules kind of thing, right? I'm the bad guy because I had to make him follow rules. But I was the one that was a saving grace keeping him out of jail. And that house I had was a necessity to be his saving grace because he wouldn't be out of jail if I didn't have that house to bail him out. But he didn't know that because he was just a young boy. But Cheryl was an abusive adult who knew this, and she was manipulating the whole thing. She's related to a police officer, Officer Mason. She had a police officer come and told that police officer I was trespassing on her property. I had to go there to get my son by a certain curfew or my son would go to jail. They gave me this delivered note, giving Cheryl special treatment, special privileges to write this note. The police actually hand delivered it for her, like they're her delivering service. Why do they give her that? Like, why do they protect her, and why do they deliver notes for her and give her that service? I was the one who was paying property taxes for my police support, but I wasn't getting that. As they kept my daughter from me illegally in 2013, when they took her illegally, they were sending her to MSS High School in Midland, but I was the one paying for property tax on that high school. But they were going in the school telling that new principal that I'm not allowed to be on the property, blah, 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 blah. They took my daughter and they lived in Wyville with my daughter because I don't drive a car, so they wanted her distanced away from me, right? When they're living in Wyville, their school district is actually Elmville. They had to send my daughter to Elmville High School, but they were choosing to continue to send her to Midland Secondary School. But I was the one flipping the coin for that. Meanwhile, they frauded my house and were stealing my house in this. But the police officers don't seem to understand. Cheryl has been a serious problem, literally a pathetic problem. But she's related to police officers. But she's related to Officer Mason. But I testified in 1998 against Officer Mason. So why do I have Cheryl Mason attacking my life constantly, keeping my child away from me, keeping my grandchild away from me? The Children's Aid was actually against Bill Edwards.